Europe is full of wonderful architecture and amazing sights, from massive construction projects to gorgeous artwork. But there are also some less wonderful things to see. This is a list of the 7 most disappointing tourist attractions in Europe. Sometimes I do pretty stupid things. Instead of making a video about a single place or a single topic, I sometimes get an idea that takes years to complete. I've seen some amazing tourist attractions all over Europe, but I've also seen some that are pretty bad. In this video, I want to show you 7 of the most disappointing and most overrated tourist attractions in Europe. This is basically the reverse of the 7 wonders of Europe. It's the 7 anti-wonders of Europe, the 7 embarrassments of Europe. This video will take you from the British Isles all the way to the southern Mediterranean, and from the City of Love to the capital of Europe. But let's start things off in the cold Scandinavian north. We'll get back to this place later. The Little Mermaid is one of the most beloved fairy tales that Hans Christian Andersen wrote. It's also a well-known statue that tourists flock to when they visit Copenhagen. It's quite a pity then that the actual statue is pretty disappointing. It's small and unimpressive and constantly surrounded by tourists, thinking, is this it? I was expecting a bit more. Don't be fooled. I think they're really disappointed even though they're taking pictures with the statue. People apparently like messing around with the statue. The head has been sawed off multiple times, it's been blown off the base with explosives, and it's been dressed up in various ways. Personally, I think the best way the Little Mermaid gets dressed up is when people put Swedish football jerseys on her. The Little Mermaid statue is one of Europe's most disappointing tourist attractions, and quite frankly, it deserves a spot on that list. Venice, the city of bridges and the city of canals. There are some truly spectacular sights to be seen here. Piazza San Marco, the Doge's Palace, and let's not forget about the Rialto Bridge or the Bridge of Sighs. But when I say Venice, I bet you're thinking of something else. You're thinking of gondolas, right? Riding a gondola sounds amazing, slowly drifting through this magical city with a gondolier singing tunes from Verdi and Puccini. But the reality is something quite different. It's extremely expensive for one thing, way more than 100 euros. And when you think about it, it is just a sightseeing boat. It's not that special. The city is also overcrowded and full of tourists in every corner. Venice is a beautiful city, but it's hard to see it behind all the people. Because of that, taking a gondola ride in Venice is one of the most disappointing tourist attractions in Europe. Stonehenge is a world-famous Neolithic monument that's around 5,000 years old, and it's also a cultural icon of the United Kingdom. When you see images of Stonehenge, you imagine a set of mystical stone pillars out in the wilderness, far away from civilization. In reality, Stonehenge lies in the middle of a field next to a motorway, and it's not really all that mystical when you see it surrounded by all of these tourists. People aren't really sure who built Stonehenge. There have been many tales about the place throughout history. That Merlin the wizard was involved, or that giants built it, or maybe that alien technology was used. It's also a mystery what Stonehenge was used for. Some think that it's a giant fertility symbol, some think that it was a big team-building exercise, and others think that it was simply a place for parties. More serious theories speculate that it was a celestial observatory or a place of worship. With such a fascinating history and so many exciting tales about this place, you'd think that visiting Stonehenge is a magical experience. Then you'd be wrong. Stonehenge is just a set of stones in the middle of a field next to a busy motorway. It's crowded and it's cold, and the experience wears off pretty quickly. This isn't the worst tourist attraction you'll ever see, but it doesn't live up to the hype either. That's why Stonehenge deserves a spot in the list of the worst tourist attractions in Europe. The city of Rome is famous for its ancient monuments and for its history that dates back thousands of years. Rome is known as the ancient city and the eternal city. All roads lead here, and it's included in most people's lists of top tourist destinations. There are many must-see tourist attractions in the city. The Colosseum, the Vatican, the Pantheon, but then you also have some more questionable attractions. The Spanish Steps are often listed among the top sites of Rome, and I have no idea why. It's a very nice staircase, but that's it. It's a set of stairs. The Spanish Steps are quite overrated, and they deserve a spot in the list of the most disappointing tourist attractions in Europe. If you're expecting the Eiffel Tower to be on this list, well, then you're gonna be disappointed, because it's actually a pretty impressive piece of construction. Especially since it wasn't even intended to be a permanent structure. It was gonna be torn down, but it's still here today. Brussels is famous for a lot of things. The Atomium, comic books, waffles, beer and chocolate. But it's also famous for one statue in particular. Everyone has seen pictures of Manneken, a bronze sculpture of a little boy urinating. It's a funny and quirky statue, and it's featured on tons of postcards from Belgium. What people tend to forget is that it's really tiny and not very impressive at all. It does have a bit of historical significance for the Tanners Guild, but other than that, its only claim to fame is that it's a bit rude. It really doesn't deserve its reputation as a tourist attraction. It's actually a pretty old sculpture from the 1600s, and it's been stolen several times. After the last theft in 1965, the city got fed up with chasing down thieves, so they had a new version made. So what you see here isn't even the original, it's a copy from 1965, which makes it even more disappointing. Despite that, some people find this unimpressive statue inspiring. There's an order of the Friends of Manneken with 150 members, and they aspire to uphold the traditions of Manneken. It's hard to say exactly what those traditions are though. They mostly seem to concern dressing up this little urinating boy at various occasions. Either way, Manneken definitely deserves its spot in the list of the most disappointing tourist attractions in Europe. Look at this, I found a place where people are doing extremely stupid poses. Indeed, I'm visiting the Leaning Tower of Pisa today. The Leaning Tower of Pisa is a freestanding bell tower of the Pisa Cathedral, and it's famous for being a gorgeous piece of construction. Well, and for leaning, of course. A marvel of engineering, built on soft ground that couldn't take the weight. Pretty similar to how software development projects are run these days. The tower started leaning during its construction in the 12th century due to the soft ground that couldn't support the weight. The tilt increased over the years, and by 1990 it had reached 5.5 degrees. There has been some restructuring work on the tower after that, so the tilt has been reduced to 3.97 degrees. It's a gorgeous building with an interesting history, but there are countless of other buildings in Italy, even more beautiful and more interesting. The Leaning Tower of Pisa is also constantly surrounded by tourists taking silly pictures in ridiculous poses. It's just not funny anymore. People have been doing this for hundreds of years. The overall experience of visiting the tower is just a bit underwhelming. It's an overcrowded tower that's leaning a bit. And that's it. That's really everything there is to the Leaning Tower of Pisa. For that reason, the Leaning Tower of Pisa is included in the list of the most disappointing tourist attractions in Europe. Before I list the final disappointment, let's talk about some honorary mentions. The red light district in Amsterdam is a good contender for this list. It's not really as depraved or as interesting as people make it out to be. Loch Ness in Scotland with its supposed monster is another contender. It's a beautiful lake, but it's just one lake out of hundreds in Scotland. There's no monster and nothing else interesting there to see either. And something else that's completely overrated is to visit Abbey Road in London. Sure, it made for a great album cover, but it's just a street crossing. It's not even an attraction. Anyway, let's move on to the final disappointment in this list. There are many famous paintings in the world. Starry Night by Van Gogh, Girl with a Pearl Earring by Vermeer, The Birth of Venus by Botticelli. But there's one painting that's more famous than all of the other paintings, and that's of course the Mona Lisa by Leonardo da Vinci. And Mona Lisa is the most disappointing tourist attraction in Europe. It's a masterful painting, just like everything Leonardo da Vinci did, and it's full of subtlety and skill. But its reputation is absolutely ridiculously overblown. You have to stand in line for hours at the Louvre in Paris to get a glimpse of this painting. And when you finally get to see it, you just have a few moments until you're shoved out again. This line, this is just a line to get into the Louvre. There's a separate line inside just to see the Mona Lisa. The Mona Lisa didn't even used to be all that famous. It was only made famous after a theft in 1911. Unfortunately for the thief, the whole art world exploded with the news of the theft, so he couldn't sell it anywhere. However, 2 years after the theft, he did try to sell the Mona Lisa to an art dealer in Florence. But the art dealer alerted the police, so the thief was arrested and the Mona Lisa was returned to the Louvre. If it hadn't been for that theft, the Mona Lisa wouldn't have been the most famous painting in the world. It didn't even used to be the most famous painting in the Louvre. But now everyone flocks to see this, admittedly brilliant, but also overhyped painting. The saddest thing is that there are so many amazing pieces of art on display just next to the Mona Lisa that most people are ignoring. And that is why the Mona Lisa is the most disappointing tourist attraction in Europe. This is the famous painting. I used to be an adventurer just like you until I took an arrow to my chest. This video took me 2 years to complete, so I think the least you can do in return is to like and subscribe. But most importantly, have a great day. Oh, and make sure you watch this video as well if you want to see more interesting curiosities from Europe.